Yeah, Europe's finished. Europe's over. Europe will be Islamic, and the consequences for the world will be immense. Imagine a nuclear-armed Islamic Republic of France. It's coming. Nothing's being done to stop it.
Today we have a very special guest, Robert Spencer, sir. Robert Spencer, sir, is an Islamic theologist. He's an author and blogger. He's a key figure of the counter jihad movement. His published books include two New York Times bestsellers, and in 2003 he founded Jihad Watch. But he also co-founded at the same time Stop Islamization of America along with Pamela Geller. Two of his books were listed in FBI's study list, and he has been part of training groups there. He has visited Fox News a couple of times.
Thank you.
A lot of refugees came to Europe and also America on the pretext of migration, seeking refuge. But it looks like that they are trying to invade those territories and claim it as their own land.
Yeah, that's very true. The individual migrant cannot be generalized. Obviously, people have come for a variety of reasons. However, one aspect and one aspect of the migration and one important reason why they have come has been completely ignored by European and American authorities, even though it clearly applies to many of the migrants, if not most of them. And that is the concept of hijra, or migration in Islam. Migration is a core teaching in Islam. The idea of moving from one place to another in order to bring Islam to the new land is something that goes back to Muhammad, according to Islamic tradition. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the Islamic calendar does not start from when Muhammad was born, or from when he died, or from when he became a prophet. It starts with the Hijra, the migration from Mecca to Medina. That's year one of Islam, when Muhammad moves to Medina. So this concept of migration is all the more important because in migrating, one imitates Muhammad. And he is the excellent example, according to the Quran, chapter 33, verse 21, that all Muslims should follow. And so if you migrate to a new land to bring Islam to it, and you're imitating Muhammad, then chapter 4, verse 100 of the Quran promises you blessings from Allah, a promise that Allah will reward you if you emigrate. So many Muslims take hold of that promise, especially in our own age. This is a great age of migration. They are taking hold of that promise and moving from Muslim countries to the West. But they are not coming to assimilate. They have no intention of becoming Westerners. What they intend to do is live by Islamic law and ultimately extend the hegemony of Islamic law over the native people of the land to which they have come. They not only come not intending to assimilate, but thinking that it's a virtue that they are not intending to assimilate, and that they're doing themselves a favor, getting the blessings from Allah, and doing the infidels a favor by making them experience the blessings of Allah as well.
Their duty to convert the others. Okay. So, sir, this migration is part of their invasion. I would put it that way. I think that's the right term.
Yeah.
Migration is part of invasion.
All over Europe, you have the assumption that somehow it's going to be different. It's going to be a different kind of Islam from what we have seen all through history. But it's always the same. The imperative to jihad warfare, to the conquest and subjugation of the non-Muslim populations has been going on for 14 centuries. It's always worked the same way. It's always taken on the same form, and it's not going to be any different in the West. But the West doesn't know or care. But ultimately, the goal is the same everywhere. That's the conquest and the subjugation of the infidels. The crime rates in Sweden, in Germany, elsewhere in Europe have sharply increased, directly correlated to the arrival of the migrants. And this is because of what we were discussing earlier, that these people don't believe in the laws of the land. They don't have anything but contempt for the laws of the land, because the laws of the land are man-made. They only have loyalty to Allah and his perfect law. And so they come to Germany. They don't care that the German law says to do this or not do that. They only care what the divine law says. And the divine law says you can take the infidel women and use them as sex slaves. This is in the Quran, chapter 4, verse 3, 424, 23, 1 to 6, 3350, and 7030. So a Muslim can come to Germany or Sweden or Britain, and he sees these infidel women. In the first place, they're uncovered. Chapter 33, verse 59 of the Quran says that a woman should cover herself so that she may not be molested. So the flip side of that is that if you don't cover yourself, you can be molested. Because, see, the idea of covering, of women covering themselves in Islam, the idea is to remove the source of temptation for men. So if a man is tempted anyway, it's the woman's fault because she has not successfully removed the temptation from him. So if a woman is not covered, she's trying to provoke the temptation. So this is the Islamic mindset. So she can lawfully be raped. Then there's theft, because the Quran says the perfect society of Allah has the non-Muslims paying the Muslims. The non-Muslims pay the jizya, the tax, to the Muslims. So it is Allah's will that the non-Muslims support the Muslims. That we work, they don't work, and we pay them money. About the jizya is that the jizya is not being paid to the Muslims in Europe. So many of them think that theft from the infidels is justified because the infidels owe them their upkeep. So this is why crime rates go higher.
Now, how did it start when we talk about Europe? The condition in especially Ireland, UK, France, Germany, Spain. These are the countries that I think every day I hear bad news.
For 1,000 years and more, for throughout the beginnings of Islam and for centuries after that, Europe very strongly resisted the advance of Islam. And the Muslims were waging jihad against Europe continuously. They conquered Spain very quickly. They conquered Spain in the year 711. In Eastern Europe, the Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, stood very strong against the jihadis for also 800 years. From the 600s in 675, the Arabs first besieged Constantinople, the capital of the empire. And then in 1453, nearly 800 years later, they finally conquered it. And so for all those 800 years, the Byzantines, the Romans, as they knew themselves, were standing between the Muslims and Europe. And then finally to conquer Constantinople and occupy much of Eastern Europe, and that is the Balkans. Then in 1683, besieged Vienna in Central Europe, but were turned back by a force led by the Polish king Jan Sobieski. They converted many, and there's still a considerable Muslim presence in Albania and Bosnia and that area. When Europe started to discard Christianity and adopt the ideas of multiculturalism and diversity, suddenly they weren't interested in resisting Islamization anymore. And the Muslim migrants began to come in, and nobody seemed to remember that they had been waging war to conquer Europe for 800 years or 1,000 years. Europe is on track to be majority Muslim before the end of this century. The European authorities seemed to have no interest whatsoever in understanding the mindset of the people who were coming in. Islam is supremacist, authoritarian, political, violent, and aggressively expansionist. And it's going, if you bring these people in, There's going to be some among them who will work to take over. Of course, nobody was talking about the radical cultural differences. Nobody was talking about the fact that the Muslim migrants would not assimilate. Nobody told the Europeans that. And consequently, now the Europeans are facing the reality that that is indeed what's happening, that there are among the migrants Muslims who have no intention of assimilating and want to conquer and establish Islamic states. And they're quite certain, and there's no reason for them not to be, they're quite certain that they're going to be doing that in Europe in the next few decades. Ignorance of Islam on the part of Western authorities is apparently boundless. Many areas where even the non-Muslim authorities are afraid to go. Uh, Areas such as Malmo in Sweden, where the fire department and the police don't want to venture into the Muslim areas because they could be attacked. And so those areas are essentially on their own and they're enforcing Islamic law. And since the Muslim population is growing so much faster than the non-Muslim population, those areas are expanding and the non-Muslim areas are receding. Eventually, of course, the entire country will be an Islamic state in which Sharia is enforced. In Britain, also in London in 2009, and we're sitting there and watching the people go by on the street, and about every fourth person was in hijab or niqab, or if a male, then with the kufi and the kaftan. And that was, once again, 14 years ago. I'm sure that would be much more of a percentage now.
Do we see any differences the way Islam is progressing in these countries of Europe, or is it the same way?
It's always the same. Islam, as it comes to the West, is the same Islam that's already in the Islamic countries. The assumption that people have in the West is that somehow it's going to be different. Either they don't know what it was like before, because people in the West have no historical knowledge and no historical memory. So I wrote the history of jihad in an attempt to alert people to the reality of 1400 years of jihad warfare. But most Americans have no idea, and most Europeans, even though Europe bore the brunt of it for so long, they don't have any idea that any of this happened. So they assume that there will be Muslims in their multicultural society and that they will live in peace and harmony and equality with the non-Muslims. They don't believe and they don't know that Islam teaches supremacism and hegemony and subjugation. And they wouldn't believe it if you told them. They don't believe it when I tell them because it's Islamophobic. It's hateful. It's the truth, but they've been told that it's hateful, and so they don't pay any attention.
Will Europe be able to fight back and regain the territories? Because I see from 10 or 15 years down the line, Europe is conquered. It's done and dusted with way the things are moving. Not a single day goes by when there is not a violence from these people who so-called are migrants or refugees or refuge seekers.
Yeah, Europe's finished. Europe's over. Europe will be Islamic, and the consequences for the world will be immense. Imagine a nuclear-armed Islamic Republic of France. It's coming. Nothing's being done to stop it. But if the Europeans can understand what they're dealing with, be honest about Islamic teaching, then things could turn around.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining and sharing your point of views.